My life was a minefield of pain and survival. I was just 5 years old when my world shattered completely. My mother, who I barely remember now, passed away suddenly. The memories of her are like fragmented glass. A soft touch, a faint laugh, the smell of lavender that used to comfort me. But those memories were quickly replaced by a darkness that would define my childhood. My father, a man who should have been my protector, became my greatest tormentor. The beatings were frequent and merciless. I learned early on to make myself small, to become invisible. Every sound of his footsteps was a potential threat, every moment of silence a temporary reprieve. The physical pain was excruciating, but the emotional scars cut even deeper. School was my only escape. While other kids talked about family vacations and weekend trips, I was counting down the hours I could spend away from home. Teachers would sometimes look at me with concern. The bruises weren't always easy to hide, and my withdrawn nature spoke volumes. But in those days, speaking up felt more dangerous than suffering in silence. I remember one particular incident when I was around 8. I had brought home a drawing from school, a picture of a happy family that our class had been asked to create. My father, in one of his drunken rages, tore the paper to shreds and threw it in my face. "You think life is like some fairy tale?" he screamed, his breath reeking of alcohol. That moment crystallized something in me, a determination to prove him wrong, to create a life completely different from the one he had forced upon me. Survival became an art form. I learned to be resourceful, to find strength in the smallest victories. Homework became my sanctuary. Books were my companions. Each page I read, each problem I solved felt like a step away from the nightmare of my home life. I started to understand that knowledge could be a weapon, a shield, a way out. By the time I reached high school, I was a different person. Bruised but not broken, traumatized but not defeated. I threw myself into academics with a ferocity that surprised even my teachers. Every scholarship, every academic achievement was a middle finger to the man who tried to break me. I wasn't just studying, I was plotting my escape. The road wasn't smooth. Years of abuse had left deep psychological wounds. Therapy helped, though it took me years to even admit I needed it. Trust was a foreign concept. Relationships, romantic or otherwise, were minefields I was terrified to navigate. But slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild myself. And then came Harvard. Not just an acceptance letter, but a validation. A proof that the scared little boy who once cowered in fear could rise, could transform, could become something extraordinary. This is just the beginning of my story. Getting into Harvard was more than just an academic achievement, it was my ultimate act of rebellion. Every late-night study session, every research paper, every challenging exam was a testament to my survival. But arriving on campus was a whole different challenge. I felt like an imposter, constantly afraid someone would discover the broken child hiding beneath the successful student's exterior. My first semester was a blur of anxiety and overcompensation. I joined every study group, took on extra credit assignments, and pushed myself beyond my limits. My roommates noticed my intensity but didn't understand its origins. How could I explain that for me, academic success wasn't just about grades, it was about proving my worth, about showing that I was more than the abuse I had survived. Financial challenges were another mountain to climb. Unlike many of my privileged classmates, I was entirely self-funded. I worked part-time jobs, tutoring, research assistants, anything that could help me cover my expenses. There were nights I would sit in the library, surrounded by books, fighting back tears of exhaustion. But I never complained. Each job, each extra hour of work was another step away from my past. Therapy became my lifeline during these years. I finally found a counselor who understood trauma, who didn't just see me as a case study but as a survivor. We worked through layers of pain, the grief of losing my mother, the terror of my father's abuse, the complex emotions of survival. It wasn't easy. Some sessions left me emotionally raw, questioning everything. Relationships were another battlefield. Trust didn't come naturally to me. I watched my college friends form easy connections, fall in and out of love, while I remained guarded. Dating felt like walking through a minefield. Every potential partner was a risk, every emotional connection a potential source of pain. I knew my childhood had fundamentally altered how I perceived intimacy and trust. My major in psychology wasn't a coincidence. I wanted to understand not just my own trauma, but the broader human experience of resilience. My research focused on childhood trauma and its long-term impacts. Each paper I wrote felt like a form of personal healing, a way to transform my pain into something constructive. There were moments of breakthrough. Friends who became more like family. Professors who saw potential in me beyond my academic achievements. Slowly, I learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness. That asking for help wasn't a failure. That my past didn't define my future. By my junior year, something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The constant fear had transformed into a quiet strength. I started mentoring students from challenging backgrounds, sharing my story not as a tale of victimhood, but as a narrative of hope. Harvard wasn't just teaching me academic skills. It was teaching me how to rebuild myself, piece by piece, with dignity and purpose. Graduation from Harvard wasn't just an academic milestone, it was my personal declaration of triumph. As I walked across that stage, I thought about the little boy who once believed he would never escape, who had been told he would amount to nothing. The thunderous applause felt like a collective acknowledgement of a journey few could fully comprehend. My relationship with my father remained complicated. Years of therapy had taught me that healing didn't necessarily mean forgiveness. About 2 years after graduation, he reached out, attempting to reconnect. It was a surreal moment. The man who had caused me so much pain, now old and seemingly broken himself, wanting to make amends. I chose to meet him, not for his sake, but for my own closure. Our conversation was raw and uncomfortable. He admitted to his alcoholism, the pain of losing my mother, and his own cycle of generational trauma. While it didn't erase my past, it provided a level of understanding I hadn't expected. I realized that hurt people often hurt people, and breaking that cycle was my true victory. My professional journey took an unexpected turn. Instead of pursuing a traditional psychology career, I founded a nonprofit focused on supporting children from traumatic backgrounds. Each program, each scholarship, each support system we created felt like healing my younger self. We didn't just provide financial support, we offered mentorship, psychological support, and a community of survivors. Love found me when I least expected it. My partner understood my past without pitying me. They saw my strength, not my wounds. We built a relationship based on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine connection. For the first time, I understood that my childhood didn't disqualify me from experiencing genuine, healthy love. Mental health became my passion. I began speaking at conferences, sharing my story not as a spectacle, but as a beacon of hope. Young people would approach me after talks, their eyes filled with a mixture of pain and potential. Those moments reminded me why I continued to speak, to fight, to exist boldly. My mother, though gone, was never forgotten. I kept a small photograph of her in my office, a reminder of the love that existed before the pain. Through my work, through my healing, I felt I was honoring her memory, proving that her son would not be defined by tragedy. Today, at 26, I am more than my story. I am a Harvard graduate, a survivor, an advocate. My scars are not marks of weakness, but medals of resilience. Every challenge I've overcome has shaped me into someone who can help others navigate their own difficult journeys. To anyone reading this who might be struggling, your past does not determine your future. Healing is not linear. Progress is not perfect. But you are worthy of love, of success, of peace. My story continues, and I am ready for whatever comes next.